dust and dead trees. So we're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about it with 3 of the people who worked on the research. And those 3 people are Laura Go, who is a PhD from Educational Testing Service, who ran much of the research and was a wonderful, she knows this research like the back of her hand. One of the things she's got is questions, even from the research. So that may be an interesting part of the conversation. We've also got Derek Olson, who's the 2008 Minnesota Teacher of the Year. He and Dr. David Bosso, the 2012 Connecticut Teacher of the Year, have all been involved in this research heavily in gathering it, writing it, drawing conclusions, and presenting it. So I'm going to hand it over to the group. I'm going to mute everybody and unmute, including myself. And whoever's speaking first, I think it's Laura maybe, may want to, we will try to not mute you, Laura.
Okay.
And I'll just do a quick overview of the agenda. Dave, if you could move to that agenda slide. First, Laura will be talking about the key findings of the study and providing the context for our discussion. And then Dave will move into taking those key findings and narrowing the focus down into priorities. And then I will be leading us in a discussion about how we can take action on those findings.
Great, ready to roll. So before I go through the key findings quickly, I wanted to just make sure that you had a context for where this came from. ETS and CCSSO and NNSTOY all worked together on this research. It was done with surveys and focus group interviews, which were done by phone. So we had a lot of participation across many years of Teachers of the Year, both from the NNSTOY group and also from current Teachers of the Year. So the data was analyzed from those sources, and the key findings I will share with you now. They're in 2 slides, and the first one focuses on things that teachers agreed should stay the same. So they liked classroom observations. They were very much in favor of having a role for peers, mentors, and coaches as part of the process of teacher evaluation. They wanted an opportunity for personalization, so you know, that everyone isn't sort of painted with the same brush, but everyone is sort of individual and seen as individuals in their various classrooms and in whatever they teach. The use of standards and rubrics, they appreciated that because they felt like they could learn and use those as guidance. And those guided the conversations with their evaluators. School-based professional learning communities were very important to many of them. And student assessment primarily in the form of SLOs. So there was no objection to the idea of using student assessment, but there were concerns about the way that it is currently being done in some states. And we can go to the next slide. So things that the teachers mostly agreed should change. First of all, the use of standardized student test scores in teacher evaluation. So there were concerns about the fairness of that process, especially for teachers whose students don't actually take tests in the untested subjects. The focus on the evaluation score rather than on teachers' professional growth. There were concerns about administrator training, that not all observers who came to see them were prepared, as well as others. Feedback, and certainly the timeliness of it was a concern for many. And greater use of peer observations to support growth. So not necessarily as an evaluative tool, but as a tool to support growth. More relevant and differentiated and individualized professional development would be helpful to many of them. And greater access to coaches and mentors, as well as more peer review opportunities and an expanded role for teacher leaders. So I will turn it now over to David.
Is to essentially begin the discussion and start hearing from all of you per theme. So 3 major themes emerged, as you might have read about prior to this evening. And what we'd like to do is to essentially have a conversation about what we feel as collectively as possible of these 5 bullet points or suggestions or priorities, which one we feel resonates the strongest with us, which one we feel stands out the most, and ultimately, as Derek will discuss later, which one we think we might have the biggest impact on within our own professional setting. And so with that, we'll spend about maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes or so just discussing some of the key priorities of this particular theme and which one we think really is a targeted area that we can, that essentially resonates the most with us. So I'll turn it over to anybody who would like to start up the conversation.
And chat is open as well, so if you don't want to necessarily speak, but feel free to type in the chat box.
So if we you know, as people are mulling this over and thinking about this, thinking about some of the things that Laura mentioned about what teachers felt should stay the same, as well as what might want to change. A lot of this might initially seem like it's maybe not quite within our wheelhouse, so to speak. But are there areas where, if we're thinking about evaluation and feedback that maybe we don't necessarily like or agree with, or ways that could be done better along these priorities, what might we be able to really bolster with our own teacher leadership and with our own experiences?
I see we have a hand up in the chat. I think that's...
Hi, this is Rebecca. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was thinking about the first one, focus more on targeted feedback instead of the score. We just went through our evaluation process, and there was some math miscalculations. And so unless you had 0 growth in your students, everybody ended up getting the exceeds. So the score is really not that important compared to what the learning process is. And so our district's in a flux right now because everybody's, even though they shouldn't be, everyone is considered excellent. And so the score doesn't really mean anything and people aren't growing.
Yeah, you're not the first district to experience that. I just put that in the chat also.
Other thoughts? And of course, you know, what have been some of the experiences, much like Rebecca just said, that have maybe hindered the feedback system? What can be some of the ways that would allow this to grow in a meaningful way? In other words, does everybody feel like they have enough time and resources for what stood out in some of the research was people would like to see each other teach. How much of an obstacle has that been, or is it a reality? And if so, what have been some of your experiences with that?
David, I think that the seeing other teachers teach is a cultural thing within a school. And today I was just doing what we now call learning walks. It's new in my school to do this. We went out and we walked to various classrooms. For me, it was particularly interesting because I'm new in my school, and so I teach English. I saw an art class, an engineering class, and a science class. And by the way, I didn't know where any of those places were in my building. But it was not evaluative for the teacher. It was to see what students was learning, and that took such pressure off the whole thing. It was really helpful for us to learn from it, but it wasn't evaluative, which is a really good learning experience.
Right. Any other thoughts about which of these really stands out as the number one priority?
David, can I ask, are you planning to then do a deeper dive into the ones that stand out? Are we just trying to queue up which ones we're interested in, or are we trying to have the discussion over it right now?
Right. So we'll soon move on to the next theme, but ultimately what we really want to do is to see where we can scale our impact. And so within our own schools or districts, if there's something that really stands out that we can make a difference on, what sort of actions can we take in terms of advocacy? So much like was just mentioned, if there's a way we can just informally observe each other, and there's some sort of plan that we can put together for that, based on some of this the data that we received, that would be something to look into. So any last thoughts of theme 1, or we'll move on to theme 2?
Particularly thoughts on which of these you'd like us to discuss later when we move into where do we go from here?
Okay, now why don't we move on to the next theme? If anything else comes up, feel free to put it into the chat box. So theme 2 deals more with the support systems. And you can see these were some of the priorities. You see some overlap, but getting support from other colleagues, ensuring that a formal structure is in place, getting away from the one-size-fits-all professional development, and prioritizing time for teachers to work together. Which of these, again, resonate with you or stand out? Can we narrow down which ones we might be able to focus on as advocates and as leaders?
Yeah.
Have there been experiences where you've been able to replace the one-size-fits-all? Would that be something that can change people's mindset, people's experiences with support systems?
I really like the last one. This is Rebecca. I think teachers learn better when they are talking to each other, and that's, having someone come in by the district that's lots of money is not necessarily going to meet everybody's needs. So really finding those either teacher leaders or content areas or whatever the teacher thinks they need work on or interested, to be able to find that peer to help, to observe. I think that's the best way to get teacher change and growth.
One thing that I've heard, this is Laura Go, one thing that I've heard in my wanderings in this area is the idea that it's very hard to arrange to have PLC time, and that many schools and districts complain that they don't have the funds to provide opportunities for teachers to have PLCs during the day, and not all teachers can make it in the hours that are left after the day. So any thoughts on how that could be done? I mean, I agree that it's a priority to have TLCs, or PLCs, but I don't understand all of the workings that would need to take place to make sure that they could happen.
This is Mary Lou Quick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm in a district in Massachusetts, and we've been identified as a level 5 district, which means that we're in receivership because of little or no growth over a certain number of years on standardized tests. I'm actually in a school that has arranged for PLCs every single day. We are in school from 7:30 to 4, and 7:30 to 8:30 is PLC time or planning time, and then 3:35 to 4 is additional time. So it's great, but I guess my concern is that it shouldn't take you to being identified as a level 5 to be able to implement that.
If we were to say take these 4 priorities, if we were to rank them, and you can either verbalize it and add some additional thoughts or put it in the chat room, which one it would be your most important one to prioritize in your school or your district? Which one would you advocate for the most?
Can you hear me? This is Catherine Kane in Hawaii.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. For us right now, we're in negotiations statewide to change the evaluation system. And there'll be 4 people from the state and 4 people from the union. And we're a statewide system. So for me, I think replacing this one-size-fits-all would be very useful, and presenting professionals with a dashboard, because I'm nationally board certified, Teacher of the Year, finalist, and I'm evaluated the same as a first-year teacher.
Okay.
So that would be my priority.
Okay. Others?
This is Rebecca from Illinois, and I definitely second that.
Okay.
This is Laurie. I'm just wondering, Sarah Pinsky, if you're still on, what you are hearing from other board certified teachers now that Catherine told us a little, Catherine Kane, what she's hearing or experiencing.
Hi, I'm still here. Yeah, we are hearing a variety of things across the board. Some districts waive board certified teachers out of evaluations, which I'm not sure is the best solution either. Some do what Catherine was mentioning. So I don't really think there's a consensus yet on how to recognize the expertise from board certified teachers and teachers who have demonstrated their expertise in other ways.
Okay, thank you. Any last thoughts, theme 2, or we'll move on to theme 3? Okay, so same idea. These were the key priorities mentioned, and it looks like some of it might be cut off on my screen, so I'm going to see if I can do this. Okay. So these were the key priorities mentioned that came out of the research. Different ways to consider teachers' contributions to student growth, using student assessment data to trigger rather than to evaluate. If standardized test scores are used, to ensure that they're fair and accurate, to reconsider the use of the average for tested subjects, and when SLOs or SGOs are used, to ensure that the evaluators are actually trained. So again, thinking in terms of priorities, I'm gonna view this again. I put a full screen here. Actually, I'll go back. I apologize for that. It looks like my screen is cutting off. What stands out again? What resonates the most with you? Which would you say is, of all the ways to determine teachers' contributions to student learning, which would be the priority to focus on of these 5?
This is Rebecca from Illinois. Sorry for keep talking. But I think the first one, considering ways to measure teachers' contributions to student growth, because learning is a process and not a number, and students are so very different, and we have to differentiate all the time. So when you're looking at, you should be looking at student growth instead of just how many people are going to meet those scores. So you can have a student, like I teach high school, you can have a student come in at like a 5th or 6th grade science or math level, but then when they leave your classroom, they jumped 2 classes, or 2 grade levels. So I really am thinking student growth individual student growth is what's important to be able to show how well a teacher does.
Okay. Other thoughts? Agree, disagree?
In the chat, we're seeing
In the chat, it looks like there's a lot of people agreeing with Rebecca on that.
Okay. As a follow-up for Rebecca or anybody, what would be any ideas or any experiences with ways to measure student growth over the course of a year or what have you?
There's a lot of different ways. You can do formative, informative, I mean, just little checks all along. And I think those are super important to do a wide variety, because a test score is not necessarily going to show student growth. You can use projects. I mean, lots of different things that you could use to be able to show that student growth. Even a portfolio showing from when they came in your classroom to where they ended. I think that's a big eye-opener for students and parents when they see, even though they may not have reached where you wanted them to be, they have shown a lot of growth throughout the year.
I agree with that. And I agree with what Laurie just wrote in there. As somebody who's a National Board candidate this year, gathering up my data and looking at all the different ways that you can assess students has been really informative. And it's way beyond just one test score. It's all those little checkpoints that mean so much.
So it sounds like there's some general consensus about the first bullet. What I'd like to do just for due diligence is to go back to the first theme and see if we can have some sort of agreement or consensus about which of those bullet points might be the standout priority. So this is going back to theme 1. And prior to getting to the next segment of the webinar. We had a little bit of a conversation about this, but is there anything that of these priorities, what stands out as probably the most important one or the top ranked one?
There was a bit of conversation in the chat about the last one. Is that one seemed to be high priority to some folks? The one related to peer observation.
I would think the first and the last would be super important.
Other thoughts, other experiences, other challenges? Okay. Hearing none, what I'd like to do now is I'm going to go to our other slide here, and I'm hoping it doesn't get cut off at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Derek.
Thanks, Dave. Very interesting to hear what priorities people were thinking about. And so while you were discussing that with Dave, I was adjusting our next 3 slides after this one, and we'll now focus on, for each theme, on just those priorities and basically talk about where do we go from here? How do we take action? So as we look at those priorities, some questions that we can ask are on this slide here. Which target areas might teachers have the most influence over? So if we're teacher leaders, as we look at these areas, which ones can we potentially have some influence over? And how can we go about advocating for that change? Who are our allies? What are our resources? And finally, with which ones have some of you had success, or do you expect to have success, and how do you hope doing that? So let's take theme 1, Dave. Great. And I don't know, David, I can't see the bottom one. It's cut off on my screen. I don't know if it is for other folks as well. So we had 2 for this theme on evaluation and feedback systems. We had the one about peer observation and the one with about targeted feedback for professional growth and instruction. Regarding those questions I just mentioned, if anyone has a thought that they'd like to jump in on one of those, that would be awesome, or I can be more specific. But again, in either of these, and you can just point to whether you're talking about the first or the last, we'll call them feedback or peer observation, which do you think we have influence over as teachers, and how can we make changes? And if anyone has an anecdote of how they have had success, that would be awesome for the rest of us to hear about.
So another way to think about it is in looking at the priorities. Some of this might be more at the policy-making level or at the central office level. So, for example, providing training for all evaluators, there might not be as much, overall impact we might be able to have. But I'm thinking about what Anne had mentioned about informal peer observations. Are there ways that we might be able to build structures, perhaps even informally within our school, building a culture with that? So thinking about where we might be able to leverage our teacher advocacy. And I'm going to actually escape out of this view because I think the bottom is getting cut off. So I'll go back to, I apologize for that.
Thanks, Dave.
This is Catherine. One of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to organize a Hawaii NNSTOY. And we have managed through Teachers of the Year to meet our new superintendent, and she wants an appointment with us and has scheduled us for just to chat with her about some things that are important. And so that's one of the ways. So we have an appointment with her on December 12th, and in Hawaii, eating is a good thing. Otherwise, her meetings are only 15 minutes. So we're going to eat, and we've set our agenda to just getting to know her and listening to what she feels she needs from us because she's brand new. The second piece is our administration has arranged for our grade levels to have collaborative time, and our children go out to other people like PE teachers and music teachers and things of that nature. So if you can at all work into doing that and then observing other teachers, it's really helpful. And the nice part about observing other teachers is you learn from them as well as giving them feedback as well. So I think those are two good things, is to be invitational to the people who we can influence and can talk to and support them.
Those are great ideas, and I think that I think Dave and I would both vouch for the idea that you're starting that that NNSTOY group there in Hawaii. We're very fortunate here in Minnesota, and Dave also in Connecticut, to have very strong state chapters, and that really makes such a difference in your ability, I think, to not be a lone ranger in talking to those superintendents. And I see over in the comments that we've had other people, Mary Lou mentioned she's in a committee that reports directly to the superintendent, signed up for teacher evaluation committee and hoping to be able to influence implementing positive change. So, yes, what we can do in our own districts is fabulous, but I think we have a very unique soapbox, those of us that are Teachers of the Year, to really leverage that at a higher level. So I think it's great to see that's happening all over.
So if I can ask and piggyback on that a bit, for those of you who have been able to do that, what sort of challenges did you anticipate? Which challenges did you actually in reality face? And then how did you actually get over or get past those challenges? In other words, tell us a little bit about the process and how, if it was a rocky road, and how it was managed and how you were able to kind of navigate all of that.
This is Rebecca from Illinois, and I have been pushing. I've taught 22 years and was a finalist in Illinois, and my district was lacking a little bit in leadership. So I kind of wrote an application for a Teach to Lead and got a group of teachers to go. And we worked on developing a leadership team so that we could give feedback and work with the administration on some of the issues, like the culture of the school that we were having. And after we were accepted, then the superintendent got on board. The principals were a little wary of it, I guess, because they were afraid we were trying to take over. But then we were able to come up with a questionnaire so that everybody could anonymously give feedback on the administration, our rules, our culture, and it's worked out really well. We're actually meeting again next week, and I'm actually going to bring up that idea of the walkthrough, the peer evaluation walkthrough, to my group. And I think it's just really pushing forth and letting them know that we're there for the kids and we're trying to improve the school instead of trying to take over, saying they're not doing a good job.
Hey, this is Laurie. I want to chime in on what Rebecca was saying, especially since you mentioned the Teach to Lead. When one of the things you learn in Teach to Lead, I was there for the first 2 years of Teach to Lead at the U.S. Department of Education, so I'm really familiar, is they talk about taking the issue that is of concern to you and figuring out how that issue, what the issue is or what is of concern to the people who are making decisions or can be persuaded. So let's say you feel that you don't have a lot of informal opportunities to learn from each other, and you think that that would be something that would really help. And there's some teachers who believe that. You have to sort of back up and say about your district or about your school administration, what's the issue for them? So they could say something like, well, you could talk, for instance, about their goals that they have to meet. They've all got burdens and goals that they have to meet, and say, you and some of the other teachers of the year have some ideas about this and about how you could help solve this problem. And one of the things I think you can do, and one of the purposes of the webinar, is to use the research to help validate what you're hearing from the other teachers, because the teachers said they needed time and resources for informal peer observation and discussion. So you can say the research shows that we're right on track with what some of the best teachers in the country are saying that they need. And so what we'd like to do is to work with you to help solve this problem.
This study and the studies in the Good to Great series all are really powerful pieces I have found in my own advocacy work at the state capitol. And that the people really perk up and listen when you say, in a large sampling of hundreds and hundreds of the country's best teachers, this is what they believe to be important in the area of teacher evaluation or whatever it is. And I think that for those of you that are starting these advisory committees, you having this research, something you're familiar with, can really be a great tool in your toolbox. We need to keep pace with to keep on track here, need to move on to theme 2. David, could you, okay, so if I understood the conversation right, when we looked at theme 2, support systems, the two themes that were requested that we sort of dive into were replacing the one-size-fits-all professional development in favor of a system focused on differentiated and individual professional development opportunities, and prioritizing time for teachers to work together to improve their craft through PLCs, opportunities to observe, and time to discuss and reflect. So, same sort of questions, and I think we got, we just sort of got started on the other, and as people put things in the chat, and that's recorded, and the slides will be sent out to all of us, I think that hopefully there'll be able to be some networking between people who are in different phases of this discussion that can continue on after we're done. But here we have, how might we influence these two key concepts? And if any of you have done some advocating in these areas, what have been some of your successes or challenges you've faced that might be useful to others? Why don't we start with the replacing one size fits all?
In Illinois, we have actually gotten 2 ESET 2 grants. So we're doing a Northern Illinois and a Southern Illinois, and I'm in charge of the Southern Illinois. And we have, because the state is so long, that's why we got the 2 different ones, because the Chicago needs are very different from the deep south of Illinois. And so we are creating our ESET 2 around each of the area's specific needs. And then after the ESET, we are developing regional teams so that there'll be a regional leader that will be in charge of doing the networking and getting the information, whether it be policy, advocacy, opportunities, learning from each other. And we're going to have monthly meetings. Some of them will be virtual, some of them will be local, so that we can really play to everybody's needs and to their strengths. So it'll be everybody in that group will be sharing their expertise.
Are you still in the process of planning those? In Minnesota, we're in the process of planning our first ESET2 conference, which will be in March.
Ours is in February, so yes.
We'll have to get some good notes from you after you're done before we move into implementation here in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'd love to help.
Any other thoughts on how we might advocate for getting rid of that one-size-fits-all, or any particular successes or challenges people have faced in attempting to do so in the past?
This one has always struck me as funny because, you know, if a principal came into our classroom or an evaluator and saw us doing one size fits all with our kids, they would, you know, that's you know, heresy. That we don't believe in that. We believe you teach the kids at all levels and with all different abilities, and yet that's how teachers are treated. Like we all have the exact same needs, and we don't.
What sort of experiences have people had, even at a school or district level, where you might have been able to go up against or counteract this one-size-fits-all PD? Any successes?
Yes, actually, Rebecca from Illinois again, sorry. With these leadership team that we've created in our district, my husband is the band director and choir director in my district, and he hates every time we have a PD or school improvement day because nothing they bring in relates to what he's doing. So we were able to push through with the leadership team that those that it doesn't directly affect, that maybe not a core subject area like art, computers, they got to, during our day, go visit other districts and see other music teachers, my husband did, within the district. And he said that was the best PD he's ever had in his entire career. So I think just pushing the boundaries of what we think is PD and getting administrators to realize we have different needs.
David, it's Anne in my school district. They just started last year doing teacher-led PD, and the teachers get to submit a proposal of something they'd like to show other teachers. It can be something that they thought was fantastic in the class. It can be any number of things. There was a lot around mindfulness this year, but it became so popular. We do it twice a year. It became so popular that teachers are tripping over each other to submit proposals. And rooms are packed, and it's the whole district. So you could be in a room with elementary school teachers, middle school teachers, high school teachers of all disciplines. It's really, really been effective.
That's awesome. And that really segues into our second priority here. Prioritize. And so since we got to split time between these two, let's move on to that one. Prioritizing time for teachers to work together to improve their craft through PLCs, opportunities to be observed, and time to discuss and reflect. Really what you were just giving, Anne, was an example of teachers working together in a certain way to improve their craft. It really ties the professional development together with PLCing in a certain sense. But if we were to focus more on the concept of PLCs and prioritizing time, does anybody have anything particular to share there? One thing I'd be particularly interested personally is, again, prioritizing time. In our district, that's the issue. And we keep trying different ways to find ways inside the school day, paying for student teachers outside of the school day. And it seems like no matter what way we come up with to try to get that PLC time in, someone's unhappy with it. So it's a tough thing to do, and it'll be very interesting to see how people feel we can be more successful with it and how we can advocate for pushing for that time, which obviously time is money from an administrator's perspective.
How we run it in my district is that, which I'm a high school, that we have what we call an AP period at the beginning of the school day, which is from 8 to 8:15. Teachers have to be there by 7:45, and we have certain days that each department is assigned PLC time. So it's only half an hour, but it's better than nothing, from 7:45 to 8:15. And those of us, when we're not meeting, we have a group of students that we kind of keep track of and remind about homework and, that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like a mini study hall, but then every department gets to meet for that half hour, and it's not out of school time, so they're not paying for anything. It just takes a little wiggle room to be able to get coverage for everybody's AP.
And
Sorry.
do you find that time is truly spent PLCing, if you will, or does it sometimes get caught up in the nuts and bolts of whatever's happening with the department that needs to be dealt with, that isn't necessarily about, improving our craft, but just the logistics of what we have going on for an upcoming event or what have you?
I had the same thought, Derek.
It depends. Like right now, we're working on writing common assessments. And so that time is used to look at the standards and get those common assessments. More so we do when we have like a half-day school improvement day. Once in a while, we're allowed that time to work with our PLC. And that's when we really start diving into the teaching method. We've only got like half an hour. So that is more so of the nuts and bolts, like common assessments. But it's a step forward than what we've been having before. So we just keep pushing a little bit more and it gets better.
That's great. Anne, would you mind elaborating on what you posted in the chat about sort of a comparison about how we might spend the dollars?
Well, every time I see there's the amount of money that's spent in the country on PD, and I think about all the conversations around my teacher friends about how awful that one-size-fits-all PD is, I think if you took all that money and you allowed teachers the time and space to use each other as a resource, you would save an amazing amount of money, but you also would be giving people what they need and what they can use in their classrooms to further develop their craft.
Another thing that has really helped with our figuring out at my school where our PD should be is we do more intellectual book reading. So we read books together as a group. Like we'll have summer reading and we'll have 2 or 3 books to choose from. And some of them have been like outlier and not necessarily educational literature, but literature that was very thoughtful. Then we begin to talk about what could be for the future for the children. And then from there, we say we need to learn we need to learn these skills in order to bring this technology or whatever the children need in order to move forward. So I think the ESATs are very good, but I also think teaching is an intellectual pursuit. And I think that we get caught up in the standards and the nuts and bolts, and we have to really think intellectually about it and the needs and where we're at. So literature, studies, those sorts of things. And my faculty here right now, we're bringing people up from Guatemala to talk about systems. So I think you're right about the idea, give us the money and we'll figure out what we need. And we'll be accountable. We will write and we will show progress with our students and growth. I think that's what we need to get a hold of, is that trust and the money too.
That's great, Anne, thanks. I think we should probably move on to theme 3 in the interest of time. So this theme, just to review, was determining how to determine teachers' contributions to student learning. And as we all know, this is an extraordinarily tough one. And we sort of landed on that number 1, consider ways to measure teachers' contributions to student growth that more accurately reflect the year-long effects on important learning goals. And in addition to highlighting the whole thing, I changed the color there on student growth because in listening to our earlier discussion, that seemed to really be the key to why this bullet was gravitating with people. So this is a tough one. I know from my own work at the Capitol to try to talk to legislators about the difference between achievement and growth. Sometimes you feel like you're speaking a foreign language, and it's a very difficult concept for some reason for many people to understand. But how can we do this? And if anyone has any successes that they want to jump and share with us, I know we'd be very eager to hear them.
So one of the things that got brought up earlier was the idea of portfolios and differentiated types of assessments. I'm wondering, however, essentially from an evaluation standpoint, is there a way to make it more uniform? So can you do like full scale portfolio experience with rubrics and criteria that's understood by everybody? Are there things like that? Capstone? Are there different ways to get into that you've had experience with?
In my district, instead of having parent-teacher conferences, we do this every 3 years. We had what we called parent-teacher student night, and every student in the high school was required to put together a portfolio that had like their goals, their grades. They had to have a sample from every single one of their classes, and it had to be a successful sample and then something they didn't do so well at. And then the parents and the students came in and they sat, and it wasn't necessarily with their teacher, and they walked through their portfolio, and it brought a lot of interesting conversations up. But we're a very small district, so we were able to do that. But really showing parents how the students have grown, because we have created a culture where grades are what is super important instead of the learning. And so then that creates all kinds of issues. So I really liked that idea where they were sharing successes and failures, because then you could see that it's okay that you didn't do something correctly. What did you learn from that experience? Which I think a lot of adults need that lesson too. So I really like that idea.
That's great. In the sixth grade where I teach, we have student-led conferences, and the students all put together a PowerPoint or a Google slide presentation with slides about their grades and their goals and their achievements and the areas that they're struggling. And, they take such pride in them, and the parents, of course, really love them. And it is a great way to show what they're learning. How we translate that into determining the teacher's contribution to student learning, I think it is a little bit more challenging. I know some of the tests, there are some tests that can be given, in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year that can demonstrate sort of more officially student growth, but there's challenges with those tests as well. Has anyone had any experiences with those in either a positive or a negative way as a way of determining student growth given a particular year?
So Derek, when I worked at the Department of Education, there was a lot of reporting from teachers that kids who are more skilled grow faster. It's the David effects, right? And so you're going to, it's a little unfair to just look at the growth rate for all students. If a teacher has an honors class or an AP class, they should grow at a faster rate, or they're more likely to grow at a faster rate. And what they were telling us, the department, was that the emphasis so much on the scores made some of the best teachers not want to take the classes that needed them the most, because they would grow them much more slowly. So there has to be a way to factor in what is the average that a student like that should grow with 1 year of English, and did that student grow more or less? But it's quite complex, as I understand it.
Yes, it is very complex, speaking from the test company person in the chat room. Yeah, I work at ETS and I'm a researcher. I'm not a test maker, but I know quite a bit about the subject. And one thing that I can tell you for certain is none of the tests that are made to just assess where a student is at a particular point in time in a specific subject have been validated for purposes of doing that same test or a similar test of a different version later in the year and judging teachers' growth for it. So unless something has been validated for a specific purpose, it really should not be used for that purpose. And in some places they, are making their own tests or coming up with some version of a test that is designed to show student growth, not the sort of tests that we make, which are designed to show content knowledge at a given time. So the type of test that's being used matters, but I'm not promoting the use of them at all, because I actually think that a wide variety of things like portfolios are extremely effective at understanding student growth and understanding the teacher's contribution to it if done right. And I think the if done right is part of the concern, though, is making sure that principals or whoever is doing the evaluation knows how to do that process to show the growth, allow the teacher to show growth.
Great point, Laura. Thanks for sharing that. We just have a couple minutes left. Does anyone have anything else they want to add on this particular point? And then we'll just sort of wrap up in general, but
actually, I'd like to make a quick point with regards to this and hearing some of the conversation, that so much of it is focused on the evaluation of the teachers. And wouldn't it be great from just a cultural shift standpoint that I love the idea of having students talk about, present, reflect upon, not only just like from a portfolio point of view, but just the idea of having students involved in really elaborating upon and diving deeper into what they see as their own growth. And it's not, we're sort of in this culture of evaluating teachers, but we know, being in the classroom and on the ground, so to speak, that there are so many other intangible aspects. I would be interested not only in student growth, but just the overall student experience, their feelings, their perceptions about school culture, and all of those things I think can contribute to getting the bigger picture of the role that educators are playing in students' lives.
That's a great point, Dave. And Anne, I think, mentioned that when we talk about growth, getting to that whole school culture, we talked about academic growth, spelling growth, emotional intelligence, empathy. There's so many different things that go into what we're ultimately trying to have happen with our students, within the classroom. Well, we would certainly like to thank all of you who joined us this evening. If you didn't get a chance to spend much time with the study, hopefully this potentially has inspired you to want to maybe to look back at it. There's a lot of great findings in there that can help be tools for your own advocacy work and leadership work, for advocating for these things that we all feel are very important, both at your district level and the state level. Particularly want to thank Laurie at NNSTOY for coordinating the webinar, and Laura for leading the research, as which Dave and I had a privilege to be a part of. But thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks all. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Take that survey when it comes, and we'll send you some materials by Friday. Bye, all.
Bye.